you may have inherited generational trauma from your parents unknowingly, and maybe that's not something you've ever considered. But generational trauma does get passed down. And the last thing we want to do as our last second half of life is pass on those generational hurts and wounds to our children. Hello, and welcome to Soul via Soul. I'm your host, Jada, and this is a show where we will help you navigate your midlife awakening with inner child healing and holistic health tools from a therapist and physician assistant so you can create a life that you love and one that loves you back. Your dreamy second half of life. From nervous system regulation to techniques to healing your inner child, I've got it all covered. So let's dive into the show. Welcome back to Soul via Soul. Today we're going to talk about what it is to leave a mental health legacy. Now, that's probably not a combination of words you heard strung together before, because when we think of the word legacy, we often think of leaving some type of imprint on our children or future generations that often implies something with money or possessions, or even the way that that person lived their life is something we want to emulate in our own life. Legacy, I guess in the broadest sense, would be that the way a person lived their life was so impactful that you want to carry some of those ways of being, traditions, or even the receiving of the gifts that that person left you for yourself and for your children. And a legacy is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Having both of my parents passed away, it's been over 5 years now since I've lost both of my parents. There's this emptiness that settles in when we don't have our parents with us. And I'm grateful and blessed that I had parents that there are so many characteristics about them that I want to emulate, that I want to bring into my life, and I want, and hopefully am passing on to my children as their legacy. But I want us to think about legacy in a bigger, broader sense, and maybe even one that's more impactful in a way that you've never considered, and that is the legacy of your unhealed trauma. Now, I've talked about this before in previous podcasts and episodes that trauma is not a thing. It doesn't have to be a single thing, and it doesn't even have to be abuse or neglect to be what we call little t traumas, which is the accumulation of multiple little wounds throughout our childhood, which still leave a mark. They can leave us with feelings of feeling unworthy, feeling not good enough, feeling a sense of lack. And that goes on to then influence our behaviors in our lifetime, and ultimately it will also result in physical and mental health. We don't really think about that. We don't really think about our burdens, our wounds as adults as being something that we can actually pass on unintentionally to our children and future generations that we won't even see. So this is a really important topic, and it's probably the most important work that I do with my clients, and it's probably the most transformational, powerful work I've ever done personally. And that was the healing of my own wounds. Because like it or not, the way that we are in this world is a reflection of our unhealed childhood wounds. Because at the root and core of how we view ourselves is at the core of our healed inner child. And unless we ever go back and do the healing work that I do with clients and that I've done personally, we don't get to the core issue of our worth. And that can result in unhealthy behaviors, that can result in toxic relationships, that can result in unhealthy patterns and ways of thinking that we will absolutely pass on to our children too. We will leave them our wounded parts of ourselves as part of their legacy. And I don't think that's anything anyone would intentionally want to do, but it's not something on our radar when we think about what we pass to our children. And the legacy that you pass to your children absolutely will also include the wounds that you have or have not healed in your lifetime. And when we think about midlife, this is often a time we start to think about that. I know I have been thinking about that a lot now that I'm in my 50s, about what kind of mark do I leave on my children? What kind of legacy will I leave? What kind of things will they take from my life that they will then put into theirs and teach their children? I know that I taught my children the things that my parents taught me. I took all the wonderful things that I wanted them to remember and know, and made sure that that was a part of their life too. So when you're thinking about legacy, and again, often in midlife, we start to think about these things. We start to think about not being around forever. We start to think about wanting to live our best life, and we want to make sure that our impact in the world and on the lives of our children is as big and bold and impactful as it can be. That's why taking this opportunity, especially in midlife, and I think midlife is the perfect time because it's the time that we often come up for air. We look around and go, whoa, like I'm on the other side of the hill now. And that can be a blessing and a curse in some ways, because it's a blessing in that you can wake up, you can look around, and in that moment you can say, what kind of life do I want to live, number one? What is the current way I'm living my life, and do I want to change that, number two? And how am I going to imprint on the next generation? What will be my legacy? Healing your inner child allows you to heal those broken, wounded parts of ourselves. Healing our inner child in midlife is even more powerful because we often have more time to devote to this such important healing work. Doing it anytime though is good. I would encourage that. Any old time you get the hankering to heal your inner child, you need to do that, because it's not often that we come right up against this invitation to heal. And often we push away from that. We push away because we're afraid that maybe it's going to take too long. We're afraid it's going to not work. We're afraid that sometimes we're not worthy still, or that it doesn't matter. But it does matter. And that's something that you have control over. Taking the opportunity to heal your wounded self, change the narrative, creates a new way of being in your relationships. When you heal those parts of yourself, you show up differently for yourself. You show up differently in your relationships. You break the cycle of unhealthy, and it stops with you. And that's a powerful, powerful statement, because you may have inherited generational trauma from your parents unknowingly, and maybe that's not something you've ever considered. But generational trauma does get passed down, and the last thing we want to do as our last second half of life is pass on those generational hurts and wounds to our children. So taking the opportunity, and if you're listening to this, this is your sign. This is the moment where you can go, wow, you know what? I've never thought about the mental health legacy that I am going to be passing to my children. Are my relationships healthy? Could they be better? Are the ways that I think about myself healthy and loving? And am I unintentionally passing on negative and false beliefs about my worth onto my children? And then they're going to carry that on to their children? So our mental health legacy is something that has to be included along with all the other beautiful, wonderful things we want to pass to our children. So take a moment and pause and reflect. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? And that's going to come right back to the question of, how are you living your life now? Are you deeply knowing to your bones your worth? Do you show up every day with joy and contentment? Are you still struggling with limiting beliefs about your own worth? Are you still struggling with having a healthy relationship with the people you love? Are you still continuing with toxic patterns that you inherited? It's never too late to live happily ever after. It's never too late to heal those childhood wounds. So I invite you to consider what it would be like to heal that and to show up in a new way. It will not only impact your health and wellness in profound ways like it did mine, it will also give you the ability and the chance to stop any generational trauma you may have inherited too. It gives you a chance to break the cycle and give the greatest legacy we could ever pass to our grandchildren and our children and generations we may never see, by passing on the healed, best version of ourselves for them to model in their own lives and the lives of their children. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Soul via Soul. If anything resonated with you, share it with your friends on Instagram and give me a 5-star review. I really appreciate you being here. And until next time, I'll see you on the next episode.